Hello and welcome back to Rams Talk Podcast. We're here today with a little bit of a different preview. Now, apparently, it's impossible to get hold of anyone from Barnsley. I don't know whether they just have no fans. I don't mean that disrespectfully. I could not find anyone, but thankfully, out of the ashes rose a hero, a man who knows a little bit about everything, a little bit about every team in League One and pretty much everyone in the EFL. Gab Sutton, EFL Pundit. How are you, Gab?
Hi, Jake. Yeah, great to see you, mate. Thanks for having me on and look forward to having a chat.
Yes, me too. Me too. So today we're looking at Barnsley, I guess. We were just having a little chat before we went live about how they've played this season. And your analysis was they seem to do well against the teams at the bottom and struggle against the teams at the top. Why do you think that is?
So I think last season Barnsley had an incredible manager in Michael Duff, and I think the quality of his coaching meant that players just developed to such an extreme level, and they had a midfielder in Luke O'Connell who not much was necessarily known, certainly in mainstream circles before the season. He had an outstanding season last year. This year, not only have they lost Michael Duff, obviously he's gone to Swansea City, and they brought in Neil Collins, who I would say the jury's out on. I think you've got to give him his due for the results. I can't say from an outside perspective that I'm wholly convinced by Barnsley just yet. But they've lost Luke O'Connell, and he was the one who was so often being the one who, collecting the ball off the defence and pinging the ball to the flanks and getting things moving. And that kind of allowed them to sort of bring their wide combinations into the game so well last season. We're not entirely sure why Luke O'Connell's been absent. There's a lot of speculation about it, which anything to do with sort of mental fitness or anything like that. But I don't want to sort of indulge too much on that because,
Of course.
We don't know. But it has been a little bit ambiguous, shall we say? But I think. I think that's obviously had an impact as well as Duff leaving, I think as a result they've kind of had enough quality to see off the lesser sides in this league because they've got Devante Cole, who's been a really strong goal scorer for them this season. They've still got some quality in midfield, even without Connell, and it's a good League One squad. But I think when they've come against the better sides, they've kind of been found wanting because they've not got their key man, and they've not got probably the manager they had last season.
Yeah, and I mean, you touched on that. I'm just looking through the fixtures here. I mean, they've got some ridiculous results. I mean, you remember the 7-0 against Port Vale right at the start of the season. But when they've played, let's say, the better teams, I mean, lost 3-1 to Peterborough, and that was just before we battered Peterborough, and Peterborough were awful that day. Lost 3-1 to Oxford, lost 3-2 to Portsmouth, lost 1-0 to Blackpool. It seems that every time they play a team that's near the top of the table, they seem to struggle. I mean, what would you say the difference between the old manager and the new manager is?
Well, I think in terms of formation, it's been the same. Neil Collins has tried to sort of minimise the disruption in one sense, going for the 3-5-2. And I do think it's been a big problem for them not having Connell at the base of midfield, because as much as, and I appreciate I've mentioned him earlier, but as much as he's a really good ball player, he also covers the ground really well as well. So in two senses, they're missing their playmaker and they're missing, almost the ball winner, at times, in terms of someone who's got that tenacity. So I think that's going to have a hit. In terms of Neil Collins, I'm just not sure that I've seen the same patterns of play from Barnsley as I did under Michael Duff. And I do wonder if a lot of the results have come down to individual quality a bit more. So I still think the jury's out on Neil Collins. He's obviously earned himself some time because of the results that he's delivered. But yeah, I think they've got a point to prove.
Yeah, and I mean, I've just got the stats up in front of me, and one that caught my eye straight away. I know XG doesn't mean everything, but they've got an XG of 21, and they've scored 31 goals. Now that's quite a massive gulf between those two numbers, and you can usually tell sort of how good a team is by how good their XG is, and it's not an amazing XG, but they've scored a lot of goals, and Devante Cole's a big part of that. He's scored 11. The second top scorer is Callum Stiles on 3. Do you think they might be a little bit reliant on him to score the goals?
Yeah, I think possibly. I look at some of the games they've had this season where Cheltenham away, for example, they played Cheltenham quite early in the season when they had Wade Elliott as manager. I remember watching the extended highlights of that one, and Cheltenham were very much the better side in the first half. And in the second half, Barnsley was sort of improved, and then they kind of took their chances. But again, there was a difference in quality in centre forwards. There's also been examples of they've played Burton Albion, and the win there was more about Burton just not turning up on the night as opposed to Barnsley necessarily being great. They were at Wigan when Wigan were reduced to 10 men after 10 minutes. Northampton they won at when Northampton don't really have a clinical centre forward and Barnsley do. So again, I come back to the point of individual quality. I think that's been quite big for Barnsley this season, and you often assume that if a team's high up in the league, it's because they've played well, really well collectively, and it's not always necessarily the case. And I feel like Barnsley's position of 5th is maybe a bit of a red herring.
Well, can you see any similarities? It was interesting. I was thinking when you were speaking then, I can remember a team last season that relied very much on individual quality. They had a lad called David McGoldrick up front, and of course that's Derby. McGoldrick hitting 22 goals in the league. And I think that was a little bit of a red herring on the ability of the team. And I think the start of this season has kind of shown that. Do you see similarities between last season's Derby team and this season's Barnsley team?
Possibly, yeah. I think in terms of Derby, I feel like it's probably more because they've got quite an ageing squad, I guess, and I feel like you're missing a little bit of that balance, and I think that's probably true of this season as well. In terms of you want the proven quality, but you also want a bit of youthful exuberance or even some PK performers, as opposed to players who were brilliant in the Championship 5 years ago, which seems to be a big part of Derby's sort of recruitment strategy. I think with Barnsley, they probably do prefer younger players. So a bit of a difference there, but I definitely can see the parallel that you're referring to for sure.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not giving you any easy ones today, mate. It's difficult questions only. And to touch on some of the players, I mean, we've spoken about a couple of the players already. Devante Cole being the big one, he's sort of the big danger man. I'm just having a look through at their highest rated players this season, and the man that's at the top is Herbie Kane. Now, when we played Barnsley at Barnsley last season, they obliterated us. It's probably the best I've seen a team play against us, maybe bar Ipswich, in a long, long time. I mean, how good is he?
Yeah, I think with Herbie Kane, it depends on the role. So I was actually at Barnsley's game against Oxford back in August. And obviously, because of the absence of Connell, which we've mentioned earlier, Kane was playing at the base of midfield, and it doesn't really suit him. I think Kane likes to play further up the pitch. And he certainly doesn't have the mobility to sort of cover the ground. But I think once you put him in a freer, more advanced role, I think he can really come to the fore because he's good on either foot. And I think he's got the sort of the agility to sort of almost deceive opponents that way, where you think he's going to go one way and then he can go the other, and he can sort of unlock doors that way, and he can put in a really good delivery as well. And last season his Liam Kitching, who's now gone to Coventry, and Nicky Houghton was really important. So yeah, I think Herbie Kane's a big player for Barnsley, and I think in the right role he can be top League One midfielder.
Yeah, it's some good points. I'm just also having a look. The second highest rated player is a lad called Nicky Cadden, and then you've got Liam Roberts. I mean, do you know much about either of those?
Yeah, I think Liam Roberts is a good shot stopper. I remember watching him at Northampton a couple of seasons ago, and he's certainly able to get across for things. And I think actually in the Oxford game that I watched, he was probably responsible for stopping the scoreline being a bit more emphatic. So I think he was. I think he's a good goalkeeper for sure.
Yeah. And I guess, just to sort of finish off a little bit on Barnsley, what's their biggest weakness? What would you say is causing them the most issues, and what can Derby do to really get at that and get a result?
Well, I think for a long time, lack of experience in defence has been an issue, although they've got a lad called Mail de Javigny who actually had a terrible debut against Oxford. And he gave away a penalty and made a few errors and then got taken off first half, I think it was. And then actually more recently he's kind of matured. So maybe the defence isn't as big a problem for Barnsley as maybe it looked like it would be earlier in the season. Yeah, again, I sort of come back to the obvious thing of not having Luke Connell as well. I think that's a big weakness. Connell did actually manage a substitute appearance against Horsham in the FA Cup last time out, but they're not expecting him to start. And while John Russell has sort of done okay for Barnsley at the base of midfield, he's just a bit more limited, certainly in terms of ability. So, yeah, I would probably say if you can attack quickly, I mean, what Peterborough did and maybe Oxford as well was attack quickly down the flanks, and I think that can be a way of getting at Barnsley, because they obviously like their wing backs quite high up, and then you're forcing the wide centre backs into awkward positions. So possibly that, yeah.
So hopefully that should play right into our hands then. So that's good news. And I guess, sorry, I said last question. I've got one more question, and it's about Devante Cole. I mean, 11 goals, 2 assists this season. It's a decent start, not a bad start at all for where we are. How did Derby stop him?
Devante Cole. I think the thing about Devante Cole is that although he's got the physical minerals to be a real sort of relentless presser, he's a bit more erratic. Where when he goes, he really will go, but he's not necessarily someone who's at it all game. So last season, Barnsley had James Norwood up top, and he was someone who was at it all game. And that kind of has an influence on the rest, whereas Cole isn't like that. I suppose they have brought in John McAtee, who is a bit more of a pressing monster, but that's probably his limitation. In terms of how you stop him, I guess mark him tightly, I guess. that's your best chance.
Sounds easy enough.
Yeah, very simple, yeah.
And whilst you're at Gab, well, actually, let's get your score prediction. What do you reckon? How's it going to go?
I'll go for a 2-2 draw.
2-2 draw. Oh, I think Derby need a win, you know. I think we really need a win. I'm going to say a 2-1 win. And whilst you're here, I might as well ask you about Derby a little bit. I think we've got a couple more minutes of time. Sure. I'm just interested in your opinion on Derby's season so far. I mean, I've seen some of the tweets you've put on, and I agree with pretty much every single one of them. What have you made of Derby so far, and what have you made of Paul Warne?
Yeah, I had a feeling before the season that I wasn't quite sure that it was the right fit, and that was actually why I didn't put Barnsley. Barnsley, I didn't put Derby in my top 2 over Bolton and Portsmouth, who were in my top 2. Because I wasn't sure how Warne's style, both from a man management and motivational point of view and from a stylistic point of view, would translate to managing a bigger club. The fit felt a little bit wrong for me, and I've not seen loads to really change my mind, to be honest. You've had some dominant displays against Exeter and Northampton, and I suppose you've got to give Warne some credit for those. And obviously Max Bird seems to be thriving in that more advanced role, and Mendes Lang's having a great season, and Cashin's obviously a top League One centre-back. But I still think at the moment the playoffs is probably the best Derby can hope for, and that's probably where I see you finishing.
Yeah, same here. Unfortunately. But no, good to get your assessment, Gab. Well, thank you very much for coming on, especially at quite late notice. You've genuinely saved me. Otherwise, we'd have had the worst preview of all time of me just talking to myself for a long time, which no one
couldn't be having that.
No, we could not be having that. Where can people find you, Gab?
So you can find me on Twitter at Gab Sutton. I've got a show called EFL Debate where I chat. I dedicate an hour a piece to the Championship, League One, and League Two. So the Championship's 5:30 on Wednesdays, League One 7 on Wednesdays, and League Two 7:30 on Thursdays. We chat about all things to do with those leagues, and then I also sort of tweet sort of opinion starters and sort of match reactions on my account as well. And I also write for various different outlets as well. So you can find all that on Twitter at Gab Sutton and for the hashtag EFL debate.
Legend. Yeah, I think you worked for pretty much everyone at this point.
Yeah, I've worked for MI7,
great stuff.
HMRC, yeah.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you very much, Gab. I really, really do appreciate it.
Yeah, cheers, Jake. Thanks for having me, mate.
So that was Gab Sutton, who stepped in quite literally at the last minute. He's about to go do a show. Well, it's 5:15 right now, and he goes live in about 5-10 minutes. So yeah, thank you very much to Gab for coming on at the last minute. And yeah, for future episodes, if you do know anyone associated with the club, any content creators that you like, get them in contact with us and we'll get them on as much as we can. We've never had this problem before. So yeah, it's strange me just sitting here talking to the camera, but I've done a little bit of a deep dive on Barnsley and how they've played so far this season. I mean, the way that they play, they seem to play through the middle. They don't put many crosses in. In fact, they've put in fewer crosses than pretty much every other team in the league. They don't seem to press that high. They don't seem to win the ball very much, but they are a really strong defensive unit with the third best defense in the league. So it's certainly going to be an interesting game, to say the least. Yeah, I think Paul Warne needs to win more than anything. So yeah, but yeah, if you did enjoy, please do leave a like, leave us a rating, subscribe. Again, if you want to get involved, you can join us on Friday. It's Friday. What am I talking about? You can join us on Sunday at 7 p.m. And yeah, we're on every Sunday. We always have a decent panel of lads on, and yeah, you can give us your comments, and then you can get involved with the show, and we'll shout you out when you say something. As long as it's good, we'll give you a shout out, and yeah, use your discussion points to fuel the show. So yeah, thank you very much for listening. As I said, please do give us a good rating if you did enjoy. Thank you so much to Gab for coming on at such late notice. And yeah, up the Rams. Let's get there on Saturday, support the team, and yeah, let's make it